Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
46% of Americans expect to leave behind financial obligations when they pass away. So it's crucial to make sure your family is financially protected. Policy Genius helps you find the right life insurance coverage by comparing options from America's top insurers with help from licensed, award-winning agents. Secure your financial future with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com to get free life insurance quotes in just a few clicks. That's policygenius.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Cutting the Distance. Today I'm joined with my good buddy Dirk Durham again, who it just happens to be his 60th birthday today.
Oh, thank you, Zod. You just called me old. I'm not 60, Phelps. I'm 50.
How old are you?
I'm 50.
Oh, that's like only one number off on the first number, and then technically, I don't know if my math is good, but it's like only 15% different, so it was close.
I finally reached my golden years.
Hey, it's good. It's good. You all the benefits of cheaper meals at the restaurants and reduced insurance and all
AARP. I'm going to have my card here soon, I'm sure. So it'll be good.
I think at some point when you get old enough, your insurance should actually go back up, though, right? Because you become more of a danger. So you're probably 10 years away from insurance going back up. Slower reaction times and
kids will take away my driver's license here one of these days. Yeah. Dang it.
Yeah. So today's episode is all listener Q&A, and I'm going to let Dirk, he's got a new intro to our Q&A. We've got a new partner here, so I'm going to let Dirk kick this off.
This portion of the episode was brought to you by Pendleton Whiskey, Letterbuck. How do you like that?
Excellent.
Yeah.
If I ever fire you, you're going to have a job like the next day doing that.
Oh, yeah, voiceovers. I mean, I'm going to start a career. I mean, hey, if we have anybody listening that needs a voiceover for like the monster truck rallies or any of that kind of stuff, I'm your guy. I can do it all.
No, we really appreciate Pendleton coming on as a partner this year, helping us with the Q&As on all of our podcasts, and then also helping support some of our content this year. They've been an awesome partner, and we're stoked to continue to get to work with them. So once again, if you have any questions for me, our guests, for Dirk, feel free to email them to us at ctd@phelpsgamecalls.com or send us a message on social media, and we'll do our best to get them included here. So now we're going to jump right into it. So elk-centric today. The first question comes in areas where you don't have a chance to hunt, how do you scout for elk and identify high probability areas before the season begins? We can all sit, and I think me and you, Dirk, have had the fortune to we know what to look for at some point, right? So I think with high confidence, we can say, all right, I can look at a map and I'm pretty confident this area has everything we think we need. But let's say there are times where I get surprised, or the elk are actually in spots where I don't expect them. But how do you go about identifying high probability areas before the season ever begins if you don't get to have feet on the ground?
My hunts, my scouting would start at probably a 40,000 feet level on Google Earth / OnX Maps. And I'm looking at typically the areas I hunt. I'm looking for the dark green areas first off. A lot of times the more lighter colored areas are not really where the elk are going to inhabit, or those lighter colored areas a lot of times will be ranch land. They'll be farmland, private property. So access would be very difficult, if impossible. So I'm going to look for those dark portions, which is going to look like national forest, maybe state endowment lands, and then kind of zoom in from there. And what I'm looking for is an area that has a few roads so I can get around and access some of those areas. If this is not going to be a backpack hunt, I want to have enough roads to where I can access each portion of the mountain range, but I don't want there to just be roads everywhere. Where certain areas, that's the case. Some of the more front country will have logging roads everywhere, and some of those places will have gates on those roads, which you're not supposed to take motor vehicles behind, or there's a limitation on size of the motor vehicle, maybe just ATVs and dirt bikes or something. But some of those places don't overlook them, because they could be non-motorized, and you could walk in and have a fantastic elk hunt. Because a lot of times around logging areas, there's a lot of excellent habitat. Got a lot of feed. There's probably some older regrowth somewhere the elk will want to hold up in. So don't overlook those kind of places. But typically I'm kind of looking for more of a mountainous, maybe that backcountry type looking stuff, and more of the national forest. So I'm looking for large drainages that have no roads in them, and a large drainage. So from top to bottom. So from the very start of the drainage, where the first little creek seeps out of the hillside, and as it gets bigger, and then it outlets into, let's say, a river or out into the front country, 10 miles. If it's a 10-mile drainage, there's a pretty good bet there's some really good elk in there, really good bulls in there, mature bulls. It seems like some of the smaller drainages, depending on where you're at, may not have quite as many, or maybe quite a caliber of elk in it that some of that bigger country will. So that's kind of the places I'm going to start looking. And within those places, I want to see all the aspects of habitat. I want to see good heavy cover on north faces. I want to see on the south face and eastern facing and western facing slopes, some good feed, whether that's grass, whether that's brush fields, just depending on the state. There's just got to have everything. There's got to be, creeks. There's got to be little places for the elk to get food, water, shelter. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. A lot of mine is very similar. I come from Western Washington, and I typically don't hunt Western Washington as routinely as I used to. And so I'm a lot of these areas, a day's drive away, a day's plus drive away. And so I rely on my online scouting, whether it's Google Earth, whether it's onX Maps, onX Hunts on my computer. One thing, and I don't necessarily need to dive in there, and I'm not doing it for the idea to dive in there, but it kind of piggybacks on your idea on like roadless drainages, is I do turn on the backcountry feature, like the roadless feature within onX. I just want to know, like, where is the furthest away from the road you can get? And like I said, I'm not jumping right to that spot, but then I will use that and start to look like within that area, kind of work my way back to the road. Like, all right, where can I get from like 2 to 4 to 5 miles? And then within that ribbon, I come from Western Washington, where it is, if you haven't walked through our reprod, our undergrowth brush, this coastal jungle, like I honestly look for places without all kinds of brush, right? It's just my personal preference, and I don't want to go put myself in the middle of a jungle. I don't enjoy hunting in just a completely brush-stricken area. Now you will find yourself in those. I try to stay away from like never-ending mountain alder patches. But similar to Dirk, I'm looking for those keys. I like to have heavy timber on the north face, if ideal, but especially Washington or areas where there's lots of water, they don't always need to go to the north face, or if the temperatures aren't getting high enough, they'll bed on the south face. So I do want that north timber, but it's not an absolute requirement. I want to be able to zoom in and see that the upper above tree line or areas that are avalanche chutes, like have some trails through them. The elk are actively using the area, or animals of some sort are there, and the food source is there. And if I take it to the next level, like, can I go toggle the date of that picture back to September, August? Can I start to see if animals are using that during our hunting seasons? And then I kind of use all of that to balance. I want some water sources around, whether it's a creek or a river in the bottom or a small pond or a lake. I need to have that water. And then as you're looking at this, you're always remembering that time of September at least, or if it's November, like elk are looking for an area to recoup. If it's rifle season, but during September, those elk are looking to recreate and stay alive. So they need to have some escapement, and they need to be able to like live with a herd of cows or however many cows are with them. My personal preference is to break an area down. I want a little bit of everything. I don't want like a steep slope for 3,000 feet down to the creek. I don't want it to be completely flat the whole way. Now, don't get me wrong, you can find elk in both of those places, but areas that I feel I've got a higher percentage of knowing there's going to be elk there, I want it to be broken up country. I want big pockets of timber that have an avalanche shoot through it, and just uphill, like there's some alpine. And then if they were to cross that ridge, they're going to get into some north timber. So I'm looking for like these very specific, almost like too perfect elk spots, but that's just where I've found that I have more of a chance of finding elk there, at least to start, and then I can branch out from there. Like, how far will that sign take me? And that's, we could probably have an whole episode on this, Dirk, like feet on the ground, like being able to read the sign when you get to these spots. Like, oh, there's a lot of sign here, but there's also a lot of sign that goes 3 miles down the ridge into nothing but dark timber, right? Now, as an elk hunter, I'm more educated. I'm like, what's okay to go down in here? We can spend more time down in here. So yeah, you pair all of these things I'm looking for, make it a little bit harder to get to 2, 3, 4 miles in. And for me, that's been a recipe that just seems to hold elk.
Yeah. And as I'm looking at the landscape, once I get there, I can look at the hillside and just determine, does that look like an elky spot or what? And what is that elky spot? So I'm looking at, let's say there's just a big timbered face, there's lots of ridges and lots of timber, and you're just not seeing maybe little meadows and stuff. How do you know? Where do you even start? Where would I even look? And as I look at those places, I'm looking at places where I've found elk before. So let's say there's a really steep ridge. And then all of a sudden it kind of goes up steep, and then it hits like a bench. The ridge itself benches off, and maybe a small saddle, or makes a knob. On those knobs, elk like to hang out on those saddles. They like to hang out in little benches. So I'm looking for those kind of features. And let's say you did see like a brush field or a meadow or a high grassy spot, and then there's some big dark timber, and then it kind of drops down, and then it goes up onto a little ridge, and you just like picture where the elk would bed and then where they would feed and the area in between, and I kind of look at that stuff. And
yeah,
and go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the saddle thing, like one thing, a lot of people, we talk about this multiple times, like eggs in one basket. Like you've got to be able to move and be fluid on these hunts. But, like you had mentioned, benches, saddles, knobs, like I guess we could probably reduce that all to like distinct changes in terrain, right? If we wanted to just, so like when I get to an area and I want to know if there's elk there, like I'll run a ridge down. If there's a pass or a depression in the ridge line, that's maybe a 200 or 300 foot drop compared to the normal, you look out along the horizon, you got a ridge that looks pretty straight, but in the middle you see a depression. Like that is a spot I'm going to go check. Like if there are elk in the area, I'm going to be very confident that they're using that area or that zone, that spot to transfer from one ridge to another, or that bedding area. Like if I'm going to quickly reduce this area to where if there's even elk there, like I'm going to go hit that bench and check for sign, and so very quickly I made a determination, like I'm pulling the plug or anchor on here, or I'm going to invest some more time.
Right. And during your e-scouting, if you will, on X or whatever, you're looking at topo lines too. You're not only just looking at satellite imagery, you're looking at topo lines. You've identified an area that you're really interested in. So you want to take a little closer look. You want to get granular with it. So you're looking at those topo lines, and you have to be very keyed in. Like, and if you've been hunting for a while, then you start associating your topo lines that you're seeing in the field versus where you're standing on the ground. And sometimes there's some little benches. They're, no more than 50, 60 yards wide, but they don't show up real well on a topo map. But a lot of times those are just really great spots where elk want to live, they'll bed or travel through. So learning to identify those on your topo lines is critical. I mean, it'll really help you a lot.
Yep.
But one more thing I was going to circle around. I feel like we're kind of talking about the mountain states or the Northwest, but if we're talking about the Southwest, you're talking about New Mexico. What are we going to look for there? We're looking at tanks, water tanks, right?
Yep.
These are either man-made or natural springs or whatever. And like when we go to New Mexico on the unit we're going to hunt, I go through and I mark every single tank with an icon, with a place mark on my Onyx. The reason why is it's super easy to look at and find and look at tanks really quick. If you kind of zoom in and kind of scroll around, you can find them if you're just kind of looking for them. But if you go pre-hunt and you mark every single tank, it's very easy to jump from tank to tank to tank to tank and connect the dots of where elk are going to be. And down there, water is key. So you really want to key in on where the water is. And so I mark all the tanks in one color. And then once we get there, boots on the ground, and we find that there's water in them, because sometimes they'll be dry as a bone, and sometimes that they'll have water in them. So I will mark the ones that actually have water in them and the ones that don't with 2 different colors. That way I don't waste time looking as I'm looking at my map again. Like if we get stumped, like, oh, dang it, what are we going to do today? I don't see this tank over here and think, oh, we should go check it out. Oh yeah, that's that one that's dead.
Right,
after you look at 30 different tanks, it's nice to be able to quickly assess and understand where to go.
Yep. Yeah. And one thing to know is you can identify these tanks, but then like trying to figure out how to hunt them can be very different, because these elk, I hesitate to call them nomadic elk, but they will travel, we've seen them 4 to 5 miles to get water. And then that morning their track to their bedding is a 4 or 5 mile journey. So it's not as simple as when we're talking about the mountainous states. A lot of times they're going to feed in bed within a half mile, max, maybe 3/4 of a mile, as long as nothing disrupts them. These elk in New Mexico, Arizona, are moving large distances, because what happens is you got sometimes multiple herds, oftentimes multiple herds come to that water, big rut fest at night, and then they all turn and go different directions in the morning. And a lot of times those treks are, like I say, 3, 4, 5 miles.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to know that, because if you don't know that, when you first get there, you're like, what the heck is going on here? And then you kind of figure it out.
Yeah. You might just assume that they hate your calls or they sense your presence or something. It's like, no, that's just what they're going to do.
They're like vampires, man. As soon as the daylight hits, they got to go find some darkness to go lay down in, and maybe 5 miles away. So they may leave the tank pretty early, long before first light.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we beat that question up pretty good. But yeah, scouting, I love to scout when we get a chance, but a lot of times the way our hunts line out, and we just don't get the chance. So we've got to make really good decisions before we get there. And you've heard us both say it multiple times. Be willing to go to plan B or C if A just isn't what you thought it was. You cannot stay invested in a bad decision. All right, so we're going to jump in. It's about that time. Everybody should be shooting their bows. Not that I'm the most diligent at getting everything set up, but a lot of people, a whitetail setup versus a small game setup versus, all right, we're stepping up to big game, like true big game, big bones, arrow stopping power. Walk through your bow and arrow setup, kind of how you determine what you're going to shoot. Is there a speed you're searching for? Is there a weight you're searching for? And kind of then what your broadhead's going to be. Just that whole decision tree before you head out on an elk hunt.
First and foremost on my bow, as far as draw poundage, back in the day when I very first started bow hunting, it was super trendy to have an 80-pound bow and have that baby maxed out. You want them arrows flinging like at light speed. I shot an overdraw on the bow. The arrows were 26 inches long, aluminums, and man, those things were just zipping. But as time has progressed, so do archers and thought processes. And the problem about super fast arrows is they're really hard to tune, and you really want your optimum. You want that arrow to be flying perfectly straight. You don't want it to be fishtailing. You don't want it to be porpoising. You want it to be super straight. So I want my bow these days to be about 60, 65 pounds. And why I want it to be that much is I want to be able to pull back and hold on a bull that locks up. Let's say he's coming in and then hesitates, and I have to hold that bow for 2 minutes. Well, I can draw and shoot a 70-pound bow just fine. And I think it's kind of gotten really trendy again to have an 80-pound bow. There's a lot of guys with big muscles these days that like to pull an 80-pound bow. But I'm here to tell you, I'm more concerned about being able to hold my bow back and then still make a great shot. So now over to the speed thing again. I found, and then a lot of other people will kind of say, if you're shooting your arrows faster than that 280, 290 feet per second, they get really hard to tune your bow, especially fixed heads. So I'm not really trying to shoot, like a vaporizer fast type of bow. I want to be able to shoot comfortably, hold my bow a long time, and still maintain that feet per second. Now I'm blessed with a longer draw length than maybe, let's say, a guy with a 26-inch draw length. Now those guys are probably going to have to hit those higher poundage draws and really work on, their stamina at holding a long time. But that's what's important to me on that. Yeah.
And even I'm going to touch that and then kind of go back through your points there, but I would almost argue that a male pulling a 26, 27-inch draw is even at 70 pounds is still probably going to be fine to kill an elk. I've got to hunt with Kelly Smith, pulling 52 pounds and like full pass through and so I think there's just this like big macho bravada thing that like, you got to pull these monster. Yeah. If you trust me, I would say whatever you're comfortable with, like give yourself that extra conservative edge. If I do hit a bone, I hope that, my setup is big enough, but as long as we, control the shot and hit things right and avoid the big bones, we should be fine, with today's equipment and the efficiency of the bows and the design of most of these fixed blade broadheads. Like, I feel like you're going to be fine. Like, I've been very impressed at some of the arrows that, some ladies have zipped through bulls, and it's like, well, 52 pounds and a 400 some odd grain arrow can do that. Like, why do I need to be, faster and heavier and all these other things?
Right.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way that they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
The only drawback to me that I can see to shooting that lower poundage with a short draw length is your pin gap. Let's say, you just don't have, and why is pin gap important is because, let's say a bull is 35 yards, and you're like, okay, I think he's 30. You didn't have a chance to range it, and you shoot him for 30. With a large pin gap, you may miss the elk, or you may hit really low and not get a vital hit, or hit high, depending on how you judge yardage. So it's just, so I recognize that. And there again, if we want to talk about arrows and arrow weight, it's kind of trendy in some groups to shoot a, 600, 700 grain arrow right now, the one that's going to shoot through a tree and still kill the elk. But, whenever you have an arrow that heavy, your pin gap for Western hunting is going to be enormous, unless you want to dial, and then you're going to run out of room to dial on your movable sight, rather quickly compared to like a standard, let's say 450 to 500 grain arrow. So I go with about a 450 grain arrow. I've shot down to 400 grains. Back before I even knew to weigh my arrows, it wasn't super trendy to measure your FOC, front of center, weight, and or the overall weight. I'm just like, oh yeah, this is a good 100 grain broadhead. I got a good sturdy arrow, and I'm just going to go ahead and shoot this thing. And I shot a ton of elk with it at pass throughs, no real issues. Major issues, unless I hit like a scapula or something. Now I'm shooting 50 grains heavier, still no problems. But, and what I like about that is I still have a pretty good pin gap. It's not super tight to where you get in a pickle and in a rush situation. It's like, oh dang it, my pins are so close together. What do I do? Or it's hard to focus on one pin, but they're far enough apart to where they're easy to focus on. And if you misjudge yardage by 5 yards, it's going to be a 5-6 inch shot high or shot low versus a miss or a bad hit.
Yep. Yeah. I'm very similar. I design my arrows backwards off of my bow speed. So I'm trying to hit that 285. And if I come somewhere between like 283 and 287, like that's my ideal setup. Yeah. And so we design, all right, the end weight of this arrow needs to be X. Lately for me shooting bows, I've got a very fortunate to have a 32-inch draw length. I shoot a 70-pound bow maxed out, so it's somewhere between 70 to 72 pounds. Most of my arrows end up being very heavy in that 540 to 560 range, but I don't care where it lands as long as my bow ends up shooting at that 285. And then, I'm going to agree with Dirk. Like, draw time will kill way more elk than the extra 5 pounds will, or the extra 10 pounds. It always has and always will. And I think, it sounds cool when you're telling somebody you shoot an 83-pound bow, or that you got this monster setup. And I'm like, yeah, but that will not kill you any additional elk than a 65 or 60-pound bow for most males. Being able to draw weights and everything else considered, like that doesn't kill the elk for you. But me being able to hold that bow more comfortably for another 20 or 30 seconds will kill me some elk. So I'm in that same boat. Like, I was there one day when I was young and dumb, shooting 86-pound bows, trying to get these 560 grain arrows going, 315 or whatever it was, just doing dumb stuff. And that bow shot great. And I finally did get it tuned, but in the end, it wouldn't have killed an elk any better than the current setup I'm shooting. So yeah, that's how I approach it. We didn't touch on fixed blade versus, there are some good expandables. I just cannot wrap my head around like knowing that there is a slight percentage or any percentage that something could fail. And so in my mind, like that solid broadhead is, or fixed blade broadhead is going to always be what it needs to be. Just a little peace of mind. Like I say, I think most mechanicals nowadays are got a pretty good success rate on opening and doing what they're supposed to. But for me, I've still only shot, fixed blade, iron wills at elk the last few years. Prior to that, I was using some slick trick Viper tricks that I had some good success with. I've heard stories that maybe some, qualities, went downhill or something since then. But no, I think you just need to be confident in your setup and have confidence that you're going to be able to put your arrow. One thing we didn't even talk about is how accurate we can shoot these bows. Like we always joke, our good buddy Corey Miller, he's like, all these guys want to like buy their way to like better groupings, and he's like, you're never gonna you're not gonna shoot your bow any better because of this $500 rest or this $500 sight or these $400 arrows. He's like, you need to work on yourself. And so that's another thing. Like, as long as you get good at shooting and are confident in your setup, like that goes a long ways than all these other decisions, arrow weight and broadheads. Get good at shooting your bow, and it'll fix a lot of these things.
Yeah, that there again, it goes right back to poundage too. So it's super comfortable to be able to shoot a bow that's easy to draw, it's easy to hold. It's just funner to me. Like if you're having to arch your back and pointing your bow at the sky to draw it, you're doing it wrong. Here's a anecdotal story from last fall. I was calling in this bull from some private property over onto the public, and we kind of slow playing this thing, and we kind of made quiet calls and kind of faded away like we walked off, but we didn't go very far, and we kind of sat down, and it was kind of a steep hillside, so I had to kind of sit with our back towards where the bull was, kind of, and we sat there for like 45 minutes, and then finally that bull came in. Well, I had to get up from a sitting position. I had to like slowly stand and draw my bow all at the kind of same time, and then get turned to where I could shoot. I will promise you, I couldn't have done that with a 80-pound bow. I probably would have struggled with a 70, but being that I was shooting like a 65-pound bow, I was able to draw. I was able to do it in a smooth, motion-free, it's not discernible to the bull, and I got drawn on him. Now, my yardage judging was another story. But
we're just talking about getting your bow. Yeah, we're just talking about getting the bow drawn.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. But
we've also got a story. I don't know how many people have seen this. Our buddy Russ Meyer, or a guy that we know, Russ Meyer. I don't know if anybody's seen a video that he put out. What was it? Probably 10 years ago now.
In 2012, I think.
Yeah. So Russ calls a bull in, and when we watched the video, I think everybody's first time watching the video, are like, if you know who Russ is, you wouldn't have questioned his skill or his decision making. But you're like, what are you doing, you dummy? Like, draw your bow. He kind of got caught off guard. This elk walks in on the same exact trail that he is, right? And I think during the video, when you watch it, you're so fixated on the elk, you don't realize what he's doing until you watch it the second or third time. But Russ is a pretty strong guy, but this also would go over to, you're shooting a bow that you can do this with. He wouldn't have killed this bull if he had to draw his bow like you see most people, like 90% of people draw their bow. They give it a big yank, arrow goes to the sky. Russ literally like draws this bow inch by inch, as slow as he can pull this bow back. And next thing you know, the bull gets shot, and you were watching it the whole time. You didn't realize that Russ had got his bow drawn back because he moved so slowly and so methodically that you would have never known that bow was ever drawn.
And the bull is in plain view. Like, he was in the bull's eyesight the whole way. Like, it was incredible. Yeah.
It was that video. It's like, all right, I need to be able to draw my bow a little more smoothly and not make such a racket with arrows bouncing around the cage or whatever it may be. Like, very smooth. And like I say, it was another example. I probably go overboard on making sure everything's perfect, because I always want to be able to capitalize on opportunities. But it was just one of those things, again, like, he had, his rest didn't make any noise. He was able to draw his bow. All these things he had dialed in to give him that opportunity on a great bull there. And it just makes you think, like, you need to pay attention to all that stuff, and maybe not shoot an 85-pound bow if you don't have to.
Yeah. And practice those skills, right? I feel like Russ, I don't know, he's a pretty beefy dude. Like, he's got some guns. He probably don't practice drawing like that. Maybe. But for guys like me, I practice when I practice shooting in the yard. I'm practicing drawing that bow as slow as I can without any movement, the very little minimum movement. That way, come hunting season, it's just part of my routine, right? I can just draw my bow back. And there are times you want to yank your bow back. Let's say a bull's kind of running in. You're like, yeah, might want to yank it back at the right time. But most of the time, you want that thing to be smooth and no movement's discernible. So
yeah. And another thing about practice is similar to practice of drawing slow. I always do it at the end of my routine because it doesn't mess the rest of my 30 or 40 arrows or whatever I'm going to shoot. Is I do the long holds. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a different muscle. Like, whether you're a gym rat and you work out all the time, like, even when I was going to the gym all the time, it was still something different about holding the bow, almost like that negative resistance. Like, you're just trying to hold it back. And so I'll do I'll set my timer on my watch and try to do a 1.5-minute hold and see if I can still make a good shot, or whether it would be a bad shot. And so as season gets closer, you start to work on those endurance type situations as you're out there shooting. Just see what your time is, and by working on it, you get better at it. You get more comfortable, you get less shaky, you can extend that time. And like I say, those are the things that are going to help you kill more elk than the additional poundage.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So that was a good segue into ethical shot placement. And I hesitate to talk about ethical shot placement because I think everybody controls their own ethics, but I'm going to pose a question and we can navigate through it. So how do you ensure ethical shot placement to make sure that you maximize your chance of recovering that bull? And then if you can go into like shot angles, shot distances, and kind of what you're comfortable with and what you're looking for before like Dirk Durham's comfortable in this situation, I'm going to pull the trigger here.
Well, I think a lot of people just need to be real with themselves on their capabilities or at their the distances they can shoot first and foremost. In our backyards or at our local range that we shoot comfortably every time, it's just like, man, I can drill this thing at 100 yards. So if I got a bull at 70, he's dead, right? But that's not the same situation that you face when you're hunting. Let's say you've been hunting and you haven't had an opportunity to shoot, and it's day 7 of your hunt. You're dehydrated. You just hauled ass up this hillside, this steep hillside, 150, 200 feet straight up vertical, and you're breathing hard. Your heart's pounding. You have a pack on your back, and there's the bull. I figured, let's say I normally want to shoot at 50 yards. That's kind of where I draw the line personally. But at that point right there, I may cut that to 30 or 40 yards because, you pull your bow back, man, you're on a steep hillside. Everything is not easy. Your bow form is probably not the best, just because the angle that the elk is above you or below you, whatever the case might be. Everything is not perfect. And you have to kind of be real about it. Be like, well, if this is my backyard, I'd drill that sucker. But now that it's not, I'm going to wait for the best opportunity. That kind of goes with that training you were talking about, holding your bow for a long time. You might even do some like wind sprints back and forth to your target and get out of breath, then do your bow hold, but make sure you have your pack on and stuff. And this is on flat ground in your backyard. Raise your heart rate, get out of breath, shoot from a precarious situation, and you're gonna see it's gonna cut your lethal distance down quite a bit. So. Yeah. Acknowledging that and understanding that is how you can perform ethical shots. Like everybody has their own ethics, right? But I think everyone can agree that we want to take a shot that's going to end with a mortally wounded animal that's going to die quickly and humanely. So understanding your capabilities, like truly understanding them, is important. So
yeah. Yeah, I've always thought that like walking out in my loafers or my street shoes, no pack on, shorts, t-shirt, like I'm cool, I'm comfortable, it was practicing until you get out there, you have your pack on, you have a chest harness on, you realize that your pack squeaks when you go to draw your, all these things that, or whatever it may be. It may not be a squeak, or that something like binds you up, or your harness is really close to catching your string, if your form's off, all of these things, like you need to test that out and confirm that it's going to be okay. One thing that I used to have an issue with is when I used to use a wrist rocket, back in the day, is I would anchor under my ear. Well, if it was an early morning hunt, I would forget that I had a hood on and I couldn't get my anchor like up in my ear, and it would frazzle me, right? Because I needed to get to that spot. And so just all of these things, like as goofy as it may seem, my wife laughs at me because I'm out there in my, I've got my chest harness on, my backpack on, the middle of the, late one evening. I'm like, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm making sure all this stuff works together. Now fortunately I've switched to a thumb release, so I'm more comfortable with hoods on, but like all of those things pop up. And I'm just one of those guys that I want to make sure I reduce all of these little gremlins that are going to pop up in your hunt. I just want to take care of that at home, not out in the field. Like you said, on day 7, 8, or 9, like if that's what cost me, I'm going to never forgive myself or be real frustrated with myself that was the little detail, that didn't, that cost me a bull.
Yeah, hardly ever happens on day 1 on a nice flat place where you're like well rested and feel good, and you're not like excited, and so it hardly ever happens that way. So Yeah, you should definitely prepare. One thing I always notice, especially when I throw my pack on, especially, not just my pack, but with it weighted down with the normal amount of gear I have it, whether that's a bivvy hunt or even a day hunt, is when I draw it back. So my right shoulder, the one that supports my bow, I have to really focus and kind of give my shoulder a little bit of a boost to hold it upright, because that pack is drawing down on it completely different than when I don't have a pack on. So you have to identify this stuff long before season. That way, when you do get the opportunity to draw your bow, you're like, what's wrong with my shoulder? It's not working right. So that way you make the best shot.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna pass my ethics on to anybody, but I'm gonna give an example of how I determine my ethical shot distance. So I use a matrix target. For those of you that haven't seen them, it's basically, I believe it's 7 hexes that are all put together to make one big hex.
It's science.
It's geometry, but you gotta read a book. So I have one hex in the middle that is basically about an 8x8 hex, with the corners cut off, and then I've got the 8 hexes around, and so when I'm getting everything tuned, I won't do this right off the bat when I'm getting broadheads already, but at some point I will start to walk back with 5 arrow groups. And at the point where I can no longer keep all 5 inside of this 6 to 8 inch circle, all right, that is my range, or what I'm comfortable for the year. It's not 4 out of 5. There may be an occasional flyer or something that I know that I screwed up on, I dropped my bow or I didn't, whatever it may be. But I want to know that 5 out of 5 times I'm going to be able to hit that 8 inch circle at any distance. Now, let's say it's a good shooting year for me, and I've had a few of them where all right, I'm able to do that at 70 yards, keep it inside that 8 inch circle, but then I subtract back. I'm like, all right, I really don't even want to shoot that far because of movement or things that are out of my control. Let's bring that back. And for me, we talk about sliding sights and all this stuff. I shoot a 4-pin, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't know why you waste your time on a 20. Well, because for me, if I can just anchor a pin, I don't want to drop a 30 pin lower than it needs to be. I just want to be able to aim. But anyways, I have a four pin sight, 20, 30, 40, 50. I'm not going to lie. I consider the dial on my bow as a backup, a follow-up shot.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot my elk at 20 to 50. Now, there was a time in 2019, there was a bull at 55, and I just kind of stacked pins and went up. I wasn't able to roll it. And so I was confident that year that I could make that shot. But that's how I established my own comfortable shot distance. So to be honest, most of the time I'm shooting good enough that it just defaults to 50. I'm not shooting a bull if it's not within 50 yards. And I've been fortunate that I've been able to hold up to my end of the deal, minus the one at 55 yards in Oregon there in 19. But now we may get into, we haven't really even touched on the ideal shot angles and shot distances. Anybody that's listened to my stuff before, watching my hunts, knows that I'm a big, I always got to go into this a little bit squirmy.
Gingerly.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of frontals. They're very, very effective, and they will kill elk faster than any broadside shot I've ever taken. But with that, here's the big asterisk, the precursor, the whatever. I need to now hit the 2-inch white circle inside of my hex before that's my distance I'm comfortable. I need to have a blade strike that, because I'm now just limited my kill zone to maybe a 3 to a 4-inch wide by about a 10-inch tall, and I can't afford to go left or right. And I even put more pressure on myself. I've really got to hit about a 3x6 area, above the sternum, above that collar, that bone structure, up into the neck. And I really need to be shooting good. And a lot of times that means I'm limiting myself to 25-ish, maybe 30 on a real good year, because a frontal shot gone left or right or low or even high can turn bad really quick. It can be the greatest shot in the world, but if you miss, it's not going to turn out very well, and a lot of times that bull's going to get away. We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way that they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Now, you all know that Jason Phelps is a nerd, right? He's like this engineering nerd, but I don't know if he's a movie nerd. And I think I know the answer to this because he says he don't watch movies. But Phelps, you ever watch Empire Strikes Back?
No, I've never watched
I knew you didn't.
any of that stuff.
Of the Star Wars series. So there's this big, huge Death Star thing that's like basically a man-created planet, that's full of like bad guys. Anyway, the mission was they had to fly down this trench and they had to shoot basically the proverbial frontal shot on a bull elk, but they're going like, I don't know, 50 million light years speed. And anyway, they have to shoot and it has to go down this like ventilation pipe, right? And I always picture that the frontal shots on elk are the same thing. I'm like, if you do it right, I mean, this whole damn thing's going to explode. You're going to kill that elk, no problem. But if you don't do it perfect, it's a bad deal. And will the elk die? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on where your elk or your arrow hits. If it's not inside the perfect circle. Why is that a big deal? Let's say, well, I don't really care if I kill it or not. Some people maybe, but I think we all want a humane death for the elk. And also you could spend, the next day or two searching for your bull on your buddy that didn't shoot on his day to shoot. You could spend a whole day on his day to shoot and not, you just takes you guys out of the game. So I feel like not only you owe it to the elk for a quick, humane kill. Also, you got to owe it to your buddy to take good shots. You start taking risky shots, pretty soon you're just chasing blood trails when you should be just hunting, And I've found now I am not a huge fan of a frontal, and I'll tell you why. Just because I know how emotions can run high in people. I know how abilities and kind of like what we talked about. You get winded. You got your pack. You're in distress. You're shooting in distress, and a lot of times, when let's just be honest, a big bull elk walks in frontal, it's pretty intimidating. He's a big animal. That thing's his face is about your level. He's probably 6 feet tall when he's standing there at normal stance, and that thing's walking in. It's pretty intimidating. And then to kind of hold your crap together and make that perfect shot, it can be remarkable for a lot of shooters. It's a tough shot to make, just that in itself. Then you have to consider, okay, is this elk uphill from me? Is he downhill? Like, what are your angles? Is he perfectly frontal? Is he not perfectly frontal? And then when you're a little excited, it's kind of hard to determine those things. So I don't recommend it. I typically won't take it. I will say if I had my bow drawn and a bull walked in and it was the right yardage and he's on the same plane as me and everything was perfect, and it's close, let's say 10 to 20 yards, I would probably take the shot. But if it wasn't exactly perfect, I would not. I've taken two. I've taken kind of a quartering frontal, and then I've taken a full frontal. And the full frontal, he died within 40 seconds. He had left a blood trail that Stevie Wonder could follow. It was amazing. The other one, it was kind of a quartering shot, which I watched Jason Phelps take that same shot, and his bull died like quick as can be. That one, Idaho, when you and Charlie were down in that crap hole.
Yep.
I'm like, oh yeah, this is like the same scenario. So I took that shot, and I don't know, my arrowhead didn't hit the right spot. It didn't penetrate, and I never did find that bull. He was bugling again 2 days later, but that was a heck of a monkey on my back, man. Once I had that, once you have that happen, it's like, oh man, you got to walk around with that monkey on your back, and it makes it really hard to draw your bow again and not think about that monkey and make a good shot on the next time. So I try to avoid it myself.
Yeah. While we're on frontals, I'm just gonna. We've did a lot of these on social media, like where would you shoot the bull, and we show a frontal, and everybody or the majority ends up aiming too low. I don't understand it, because then we will show the bull, like basically we twist it 90 degrees and show you like, well, your arrow literally just went through the bottom eighth of the elk. Mm-hmm. Like if you were to, the vitals, like you still want to imagine. So if the bull's walking uphill, you would maybe want to hit a little lower. But if the bull's walking downhill, like downhill to you, you would want to hit a little higher. And if it's on plane, you need to intersect the center of that. We're trying to hit that connection between the heart and the lungs, like the mass, the entire, pump of the, everything that's making everything else work. And it's a pretty small section, but it's located about halfway up the bull's body. And if you're going low where most people end up wanting to always pick, you're going to, like, maybe if you can get through the sternum and all the heavy bone structure there, you maybe will catch the heart. But that bone structure is going to protect the majority of the heart at most of your angles. Like you got to get up into the soft tissue and get up into the heart where the heart connects into the lungs. And so that's one thing on angles that I think a lot of people not understanding the angles and where the vitals are at. Everybody seems to aim low on a frontal, which is not going to work out very well for you or the elk.
Yeah, and I want to bust a myth right here, because a lot of people say, "Oh, you want to aim at the hair transition where it goes from light to dark or whatever," and just the fact is, every elk is different. Their hair is not going to be exactly in the same place. The transition is not going to be in the same exact place, and as a bull come walking in on you, it's going to be tough to recognize that spot. So you have to understand anatomy to hit that thoracic opening, which is going to be about halfway. If you return that elk's broadside, it's going to be like, if you were to make a line halfway between top and bottom, then that line would go straight out to the thoracic opening. And that's where the line has to be. Above that, you're going to hit him in the neck. Now you may kill him, you may not. Below it, like Jason said, there's that all that bone mass down there is going to be really tough. Can you shoot through it? It has been done, but to shoot through it and hit the heart or something vital, it's tough. And if you hit high, you're going to hit in the neck part of the spinal area, and that's some massive bones to try to penetrate through too. So you just have to really study this and really understand elk anatomy and also understand your shooting ability.
Yeah. And I'm going to, one more point on the frontal, and then we'll switch to broadside angles. I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here, and it's not really telling on myself. The bull died within 30 seconds, but any of those that watched my hunt with Ranella on Netflix, I think it was season 10, episode 6 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Everybody's always like, what happened on the shot? Like we never showed it. Well, I was so locked in on where the vitals were. I didn't pay attention to anything else. The bull was walking downhill to my position at about a 30-degree slope. So not super steep, but pretty good downhill. And the bull, as he was walking, was bouncing his head. But I was locked in on where I was, not really peeking around the side, but kind of like, where's everything lining up? Like, what are my angles? And I paid no attention to anything besides where I had to get that arrow in to kill it. And as he's doing that, he dropped his head on one of his bounces, as he's walking along, and that arrow actually went in just below his cheek, and it went in through his neck, but the veins were hanging out by his face, and it looked like I had shot that bull in the face. And Steve just elected to not, I thank him for it because it didn't look good. It wasn't a good visual, but that bull, the arrow went to the exact right spot. I've never to this day seen more blood. There's been equal bloods on frontals, but that bull literally twirls, stands there for about 4 or 5 seconds, walks over, and we can hear his horns like hitting the rocks. Within a minute, he's dead, expired. But it was one of those things where if I hadn't been paying full attention to angles and vitals, I would have, just to avoid hitting him in the neck or the face, I would have aimed low, which would have been a bigger mistake. If that makes any sense. So I'm just giving some examples, like real life examples, like the arrow didn't look like it went in the right spot, but if you can imagine an elk walking downhill, you hit him high and that arrow basically goes in horizontal, like we hit all the right stuff at that angle. So just another example of, you just really need to identify and understand how everything lays up in there, and that the angle that you're at, the angle that the arrow is traveling, the angle that the elk is, and it's really that difference in angle of the arrow's path and then the bull's body's path, like how and where you need to intersect vitals. So I'll diverge from frontals, and we'll maybe go into some broadside shots and what you're looking for there, and what your approach is to avoiding bone and all of that.
A frontal shot, one last thing. A frontal shot to me is basically the difference between a frontal and a broadside. Broadside shots are like shooting free throws in basketball. Frontals are like that buzzer beater at the end where you're at the weird end of the court and you just Hail Mary it and like hope it goes in the hole. That's about the same amount of odds against you, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. People will probably argue that, but I don't know. I'm not a fan, but.
Okay, so the old bread and butter, the broadside shot. Ideally, sometimes it's tough to get the elk to do this when you're calling yourself or you don't have anybody else able to kind of turn the bull for you. A lot of times what happens is that bull will come into a yardage where he expects to see the bull or the cow. I don't want to say get nervous, but doesn't see what he wants. And then he'll he does that like I'm leaving dance, right? Where he kind of twirls and moves and, may do his dance, or maybe he's traveling through the area on his way to the call-in. Regardless of what it is, you'll end up getting a broadside or a slightly quartering to or a slightly quartering away shot. Like, what's your approach? What are you thinking about on all of those, and what's your preferred shot there?
Yeah, a lot of times they'll have them come in and they'll kind of pause, or if you can tell by how their eyes look or their demeanor, they come in, they'll pause, they're looking for that other elk. And then if they don't see it, then they may come in frontal and then they turn sideways. And I'm waiting for that sideways shot typically. And where I'm going to aim, if you aim right in that crease, right, very close to the shoulder blades and scapula, there's kind of a little V there where the scapula comes up and then the leg bone kind of comes down. There's almost makes kind of a V there. Right in that little pocket is like the most deadly spot to hit them. But if things don't go right, let's say the bull moves at the shot. Let's say I'm torquing my bow. Let's say I don't execute the shot perfect. It's very easy to hit that shoulder blade. So I typically don't aim at that little pocket. I'm going to aim away from it a little ways, maybe 6 inches away from that pocket. I don't want there to be any issues with penetration whatsoever. So I will kind of aim a little further back, but not too far back. I don't want to try to aim, back to where it's like, now I'm shaking hands with liver and lungs. I want to, there's a happy median there.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, we can argue over all day whether you want to hit high lungs so it dies quick and don't get any blood, low lungs, it lives a little bit longer, but you get a blood trail, do you go heart? But I'm in that same, I go about halfway up the body, which is maybe just a little tighter, a little higher than that crease. And then I come back from it 3 to 6 inches typically is like my ideal aiming. And the reason for that is it gives you the most margin for error, right? I can go 3 to 6 inches to my left and still not hit that bone. I can go up 6 inches and still catch the lung. I can go down 6 inches and catch heart or the bottom of the lung. And I can go back 6 inches and still catch lung. Right. And so it really just gives me the biggest margin for any error that may affect, if we're going to be able to kill or to quickly kill that bull. And so that's been always my approach. Like, slightly below, if you get real nitpicky, slightly below half, 6 inches back from that crease, 3 to 6 inches. And that's always, on a broadside shot, that's been a good location. Now, you get that. I love a quartering away shot as well, but we need to start being smart hunters and once again working on those angles. Like, as that bull starts to quarter away, my arrow's going 8 inches back from the crease, 10 inches back from the crease, 12 inches back from the crease. And what a good, rule of thumb, and you've heard it, you're not hearing it from me first, is try to imagine where that arrow is going to cross through and come out the other side. And you're trying to put together, once again, using all this geometry, like where does that going to line everything up? Where are you going to hit, like through the middle of the lungs, through the heart? And so as the more that bull quarters, the more that arrow's got to come back to a point where you no longer want to hit him in the hind quarter, right? And so that's it. Like, that's my limit. Like, all right, I'm no longer shooting at this bull because he's turned too much. So that's kind of how the quartering away, and then quartering two, you get a little margin of error, but at some point, if he gets turned too much towards you, 10 or 15, you can't catch him on the frontal. You can't really catch vital because of the leg bones behind it. And so you're really just kind of stuck waiting for a better shot opportunity at some point on a quartering two.
Yeah. The quartering two is tough. You can squeak it in front of the shoulder if you have the right angle, and it'll work great. Unless it don't, you shoot behind it, you could catch one lung and liver. Typically, a liver shot's pretty deadly. There's not going to be a lot of blood, and sometimes they die fast, sometimes they don't die fast. It's just, You never know. And then that quartering away shot, you have to be super careful. Let's say you execute the shot, it's really severely quartered away from you, and you enter the paunch, your arrow enters the paunch, and it continues and then lodges on the offside shoulder. So you're going to get all the goodies, but the problem is the entry hole. You're not going to have an exit wound sometimes. So the entry hole is going to be the only hole that thing has. And it's going to, the guts, then a lot of times some fatty material, sometimes just, gut material is going to clog that hole up, and you're just not going to get a good blood trail. I've been involved with that before. I had a friend that shot a bull like that, and we tracked it. And we didn't find it till it was too late. It was a very lethal shot, but did not leave enough sign to recover him in time. So you just have to be really careful with those quartering angles, and maybe err on the side of not having it quartering too far away, at a too steep of an angle. So where your arrow will enter the rib cage on your side, and then lodge in that front shoulder, or exit the cavity in front of the front shoulder.
Yep. Two holes are always better than one, for sure. We can get into the nitty gritty. Like, people that have shot enough bulls have seen it. Like, high lung probably is one of the quickest kill shots as far as like the bull, but it leaves you no blood. So where I hunt in the jungle, like, there have been times where I've hit a bull high. I'm like, gosh dang it. You start to think like, I'm never going to be able to track him now. But thankfully they've died in 10 or 15 steps. It's that quick at times. Mm-hmm. Or the bull may live a little bit longer, but if I'm hunting and I'm trying to pretend like I've got this down to a science, where if I'm hunting brushy areas, like, all right, I'm going to hit the bull low now. And if it's wide open, I'm going to hit the bull high. It's not that I'm not that, detailed in it, but there are times where it's like, all right, the lower heart, lower lung type shot is going to make sure I've got good blood. He's still going to die, and I'm going to be able to find him and make sure that you can, bring all the meat back to your cooler, versus like, all right, I'm going to take a risk on it and hit him a little bit higher. You're playing with that void, along the back. You're playing with not a lot of blood, albeit it will die quick. But if you give that bull, 100 to 200 yards of ability to sprint, like, it just become really difficult to find. So another thing that needs to go through your head is, keep your shot low. And at times, if you're in the right terrain, then a higher shot will be just fine. But like I say, I usually aim for below the half line, and that guarantees I get good blood, expires quick, and just seems to be the best of all options there.
And without without watching videos back, like it's been really valuable to film our elk hunts over the years, because what you think happens at the moment of truth when you fire the bow, when you release that arrow, versus reality are a lot of times two different things. What you see and perceive, because everything moves at such a fast time and you're so hyper focused. But for instance, I shot this bull in 2019. I injured my shoulder that year, and I had to draw my bow with a mouth tab, and you can look that up on my YouTube channel, Mouth Tab Madness. I think it's episode 10 where I shoot the bull. But anyhow, I was aiming below that center line, like we talk about, and this bull was just kind of coming. He was pissed off, and he was not the least bit alert. He wasn't looking for danger, and I had my pin on him, and I released the arrow, and it hits him. He runs off, and then he pauses, and then he takes off again. But anyway, so I just know I just crushed this thing. Like, I know I hit the perfect spot. There's no way I didn't. The shot felt good and everything. Well, we find the bull. He didn't bleed real great. Well, he bled internally because the arrow had hit above that center line. I'm like, man, I hit really high. Like 8 inches high. Like, that's crazy. Well, you watch the video back, and at the shot, that bull that was not really, looking for danger, he dropped about 8 inches. So that if it wouldn't have been for that, it would have hit perfect. So giving yourself that room, aim just a bit below the center line, not too close to that shoulder, because anything can happen. Those, and then the next elk you shoot, when the bow goes off, nothing happens, but the arrow just burying right where you aimed. So it's hard to anticipate exactly, but aim to places where even if the animal reacts, it's still going to hit good vitals, and you'll be able to find them. Yep.
And piggyback on that a little bit, should you, similar to whitetail hunting, where people like go to the lower edge a lot of times of the vitals, right? Knowing that gives them more margin above. Would you ever aim, low on an elk, or would you just assume that the majority of the time they don't drop? Like, that was a little bit of an anomaly, or you're just going to aim your normal spot, and then with an elk being as big as they are, we still have that that room above it to still make a vital hit, but you just, like you did, ended up with a little less blood.
Right. I'm going to aim my normal spot, but that normal spot is just below center line. So you don't want to aim at center line, because then if they react and drop too far, you may not have enough blood to follow.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. Well, appreciate having you on. Always nice to chat elk with you. Yeah. And like we're talking here a lot. It's middle of May. It's time to start shooting your bows, getting everything dialed in. For me, I usually get my stuff dialed in about this time, and then kind of really go on cruise control, try to shoot 20, 30 arrows 3 or 4 times a week. And just and then I go on real cruise control as it gets towards season, like maybe shooting 5 to 10 shots and really concentrating on every shot's good. But get your setups figured out now, so there's not a big panic before. Make sure everything's tuned for broadheads already. And that's what we got on this episode of Cutting the Distance. Thanks for joining, Dirk.
Yeah, I was going to tell everybody one more thing. If you want to really check out, find your weaknesses or your chinks in your armor, go to the Total Archery Challenge here in one of the Western events, where it's real steep and excessive distances and high elevation and stuff. And that is a great warm up for elk season to identify your strong points and your weaknesses too, because we didn't even talk about third access on your sights and stuff. And that's a place that's gonna find it. And it's really hard to find set that third axis in your backyard. You'll have to go shoot that in at a steep angle somewhere out of town if you have that opportunity somewhere. But hit up those extreme 3D archery shoots, and that'll really help you out for season this fall. So
and it'll frustrate the absolute hell out of you when you can't figure out how to deal with your third axis and get it tuned in. So it's a great learning experience.
For sure.
And it'll really humble you that, like, maybe I should keep my shots inside of 40 or 50 when it gets steep.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff goes haywire quick. So if you guys ever see pictures of me shooting off the tip top of my roof down to the target, just know that I'm not crazy. I'm just trying to get my third axis dialed in. All right. Thanks a lot, Dirk. Have a good one. Happy birthday, and we'll check in later.
Thanks. Yep.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.